Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast. My guest on the show today is the amazing Dr. Jeff Langmaid. Jeff was with me last year on the show there too. Let me start with this. Gang, he's one of the good guys in marketing, and not only is he one heck of a lovely guy there too, he's absolutely brilliant. We spoke a lot today about content creation and the difference, in fact, what we need to be doing right now, and I know I say this all the time, but it's more important than ever that you be building relationships. In fact, Jeff has this concept that he talks about relationships instead of transactions. If our relationship with our community is based on know, like, and trust, as opposed to them coming in and having a service with us and just kind of disappearing, you're building the foundations of a really solid practice that when there are bumps, and we're experiencing a bump in the moment there too, our whole practice doesn't crash as well. What I love so much about this episode is that Jeff lays out a framework from monthly to weekly to daily content. And I know that might sound overwhelming for you, but when you listen through Jeff's content, his framework with regards to this, what most of you will start to think is like, man, I could do that. And even if you were to do a version of just 50% of this too, there would be so many more people in your community who would be knowing of your brilliance. He holds nothing back. You're gonna love this episode. I loved it. I'm gonna stop talking now. Let's jump in and listen to the amazing Dr. Jeff Langmaid. See you in there.
Welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast, where we guide natural health and wellness experts through the pitfalls of marketing. Each episode, you'll learn simple, effective, easily actionable, and heart-centered marketing strategies. And here's your host, Angus Pyke.
Dr. Jeff Langmaid, welcome to the show. How are you, buddy?
I am doing great. It's been a while. It's always good to connect. I always think of you because you are one of the most nice guys I ever met upon first meeting, and you retain that quality today. So I appreciate you inviting me to come on. It's always good to come and chat.
You know what, Jeff? That's probably probably one of the nicest things that anybody could ever say to me. I appreciate that. So thank you. I try to, it's interesting. I had the pleasure about 8 or 9 years ago, with some of the work I was doing in the chiropractic profession at that stage there too, to speak on the stage around the world. So for the UK and over in the US and stuff like that too. And it was, I'm sure it's not different in any other profession there too. And many of the mentors who I'd looked up to for a long time, who I'd seen on stage and idolized, put up on a pedestal, sometimes when you would meet them behind the stage, often they weren't very nice people. And it saddened me a little bit there too. And I thought it's such a shame that we have to feel that there needs to be a difference front of stage and back of stage. And so I've always tried to go out of my way to show my warts, to be who I am at all different times like that too. So you saying that is about as good a compliment as I can possibly get. And while we're having a love infest through here, the feeling is straight back at you, buddy. So
well, thank you very much.
From the time that we met over in Puerto Rico, which seemed like forever ago, so which is great. Now, this is our second episode. Our first episode we did, which I'll link to in the show notes, was one of those episodes that was, if people are looking for ways that they can reach more patients, have more impact in their community, that episode is so full of just tactics, the exact step-by-step for you to position yourself as an expert in your community, for you to build relationships with other health practitioners there as well. If people haven't listened to that episode, if they don't know who you are, can you give them a couple of moments of your story up until now, and then we'll get into, I'm excited to chat today.
Sure thing. So my name is Jeff Langmaid, and I have a company called The Evidence-Based Chiropractor. So some people might have seen things on Facebook or YouTube or maybe the podcast. That's probably where most people, if you've heard my name before, it's probably been through The Evidence-Based Chiropractor. So I've been a chiropractor for a little bit over 15 years. I went to Palmer, Florida. And I've sort of had a unique journey, my own kind of journey, just as everybody does, where I came out, was an associate. I had my own small boutique practice. Then I kind of took this weird left turn, especially about 10 years ago. It was really weird, where I was practicing in multidisciplinary clinic. So a big orthopedic group. It's not everybody's cup of tea, for sure, but it exposed me to a totally different way of thinking about practice. I was able to be a chiropractor within this large group. Then I went on to predominantly a surgical group to start their conservative care wing. And that group was spending millions upon millions, about $5 million a month, on advertising each and every month, and the valuation of the company was about $1 billion. So that showed a whole new level of sort of just how people are doing it at scale. So I say that all to say, I've had a super unique journey throughout it. I always try to learn from each and every experience. And as we sit here today, my sort of day-to-day is writing, speaking, running the evidence-based chiropractor. And then I have a couple other projects that I work on as well. The Smart Chiropractor, which we're going to talk about today. I have a staffing service called Chiro Office Coverage. And I have a spinal imaging company called AOMZ Spinal Diagnostics here in Florida. So I sort of have my hands in a few different things. I've always loved the business, the marketing, and the entrepreneurship that's involved around what we do as chiropractors. And I always think and try to peel it back to the research and the evidence to the best of our ability to inform our decision making. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
You, before we started hitting recording with this too, you were sort of saying like, man, like, how do you get so much stuff done? And where's it all kind of going there? Talk about getting lots of stuff done there too. Hey, I've got a question for you. And this is probably a reflection of some of my, maybe it's an inferiority complex there too. But, you know, I often have these fantasies of, you know, because we've all had patients that we've cared for that we know, had they not come and seen us as a chiropractor, and again, you know, we've got naturopaths and Chinese med practitioners, that if they hadn't come and seen us, and they would have gone and had surgery and whatnot there too. But I'm yet to been able to build relationships with surgeons where they would go, hey, listen, before we try this surgery, go and see a chiropractor, go and try this first. But that you worked like that for a little while first, where that was the aim of the game, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting thing because it's almost like, if you think of it like a marketing funnel, as people will talk about, there's almost the same thing going on, meaning by the time somebody gets to a surgeon, the overall amount of volume is going to be lower. So that's why on a previous episode, we talked extensively about relationship building, and GPs, primary care physicians, these other portals of entry are some of the best people because they have higher volumes of individuals who might not have explored anything yet. They're really a first line of care. However, you're 100% correct. When you get to the surgeon, there are still people that go to the surgeon that they're not going to have surgery no matter what the surgeon tells them. And at the bare minimum, I think there's a lot more than this, but at the bare minimum, having a fantastic option when the patient refuses the care. People shouldn't live in chronic pain. And if they don't want to have surgery, most surgeries are elective. That's an opportunity to bridge the gap and build a relationship that's not competing with them. But over time, I would say you have to get one referral before you get 100. But if you have a patient and you do a great job with a patient who's on the fence or just refuses to get that surgery, now you start to build trust with those other providers. You start to learn about who their networks are, who are the other doctors that they're working with, and that opens things up. But as with anything, and I know we're going to talk about it today, a lot of this comes down to having a good strategy, being consistent with your messaging, and putting in some of that work, because relationships don't happen automatically. It does take a system. You have to have a process, and it needs to be a focus if you intend on having success with it.
And that's been something that, again, and thanks in part with some of the work that you talked about on our previous episode, we've been able to achieve that really like a great result with our general practitioners in around, but certainly not that next level up there too. We could probably do with some more work about that. What we're going to talk about today, though, is, again, to touch on what we chatted before we kind of started there. For the last 6 months, both you and I have been busier than ever with our helping chiropractors reach more people. There seems to be that, given the shenanigans that's going on, the shutdown, there's this level of vulnerability where, peeps have been thinking, man, I've got to work out how I can reach the people. I'm more vulnerable in my practice than ever. So they've been open to, in my case, creating videos, in your case, wanting to organically create content. The challenge tends to be is that if they try and do it all themselves, they get distracted and overwhelmed and don't know how to go about it. If they handball it all off, to be honest, when I see lots of the social media companies and stuff like that too, they don't understand some of the nuances of what we're doing as health professionals. They miss some of the key things in terms of the imagery that they use, the content that they put out there, or they just don't really care. And so it doesn't kind of work there too. And it's part of what excites me about what you do, because you bridge that gap so beautifully. So with that, let's talk about kind of marketing automation, content creation, how to do it, what your suggestions are for all of that kind of stuff there too. Can you get us started?
Yeah, I'd love to dive into that. It's such an important piece of the puzzle for no matter what type of provider you are. It's
Mm,
about getting your message out to the people in your community, to the people within your health tribe, right? As Seth Godin would say, you build these tribes. And ultimately there's so many providers out there that they might have, 500 or 5,000, inactive patients who have come through their practice, right? They might have a couple hundred or maybe even a couple thousand people following their Facebook page. They might have a couple hundred or a couple thousand on their email list, but they don't have any coordination with how
mm,
they're going about keeping these individuals within their ecosystem. We always say we like to build relationships instead of transactions.
yeah.
Transactions are do your service, pay me the money, and move along, and I'll compete for you again, your attention with a Google ad down the road. And we believe that there's just a better way to do that, and it's by being consistent, right? The biggest two things, you nailed it. The two challenges that most providers we work with have is content and consistency.
Mm,
It's creating the content and producing the content at the scale and volume that they need to be effective. I know you just do such a great job with that with many of your private coaching clients, but many providers out there just struggle with that, and
mm.
consistency ties right in with that. They're looking at a blank sheet of paper, so they put it off till tomorrow. They don't know. They send an email and they're like, we're good for a quarter. We'll send a quarterly newsletter, and it's just, you can't pick up any momentum. And the sad part about it is that many of us might have hundreds and or thousands of people that we've seen, yet we still need and struggle to have new patients come into our practice. And
Mm,
that's a strategy issue. That's not, for many docs, a care issue. And
yeah.
by automating the content, by staying consistent, by having fantastic, beautifully designed things that stimulate action, that have good calls to action, that are
Mm,
congruent, and have your messaging go out multi-platform, meaning your social media channels, your email, your screens in your office, for instance,
mm,
and everywhere where you have a presence. Now you start to cultivate a tribe of individuals
mm,
that will choose you time and time again because you built a relationship, because you're their trusted healthcare provider. And it's not that every time they need whatever it is you do, they're searching for whoever the cheapest option is on Google, and now you're competing with an ad or a person who already knows, trusts, and like you. So that's really what we're trying to
mm.
solve from a strategy perspective. I think we've done a really good job. I'm happy
Yeah.
to get into more of the strategy or tactics, but that's some of the thought process by where we come from. Relationships instead of transactions, and really smashing those two big challenges of content and consistency and taking care of it for the physician.
Mm. So what I want to do, because I want to dive into what does great content look like and what does consistency look like. But before I do that, I just want to make a distinction for our audience at the moment. When we talk about this idea of content marketing, this is the idea where we're going to be sharing cool and helpful content to, as what Jeff said before, to have more people know, like, and trust us. It's different from a transactional type of marketing, which might be a Facebook ad or Google ad. Now, it's not, here's the challenge, gang. I don't want you to think that it's either or. It should be both and. We get into these camps of, I'm either going to do this stuff, it's either going to be a referral practice, or I'm going to be, all about new patients here, there. It very rarely in life is it ever either and. It's always both with regards to this too. So when we're building this content, when we're staying front of mind, there's a concept in psychology that we call mere exposure, which just kind of says this: the more we see somebody, the more likely we are to like them and therefore choose them. In essence, that's where we want to go with that too. So with that being said, can we talk a little bit? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, and because you said this content which has a call to action, which is getting people, it's helpful for them, that's congruent, all that kind of stuff. So what are some of the rules that you go through when you're creating this content for your audience?
Yeah, let's break it down real simply. The way we look at things is monthly campaigns,
Yes.
weekly topics, and daily posts. So
Yes.
that's kind of our overarching strategy. So here's an example. And we love to alternate monthly campaigns. And here's what I mean by that. Monthly campaigns, we like to alternate body region with lifestyle or life effect. I'll give you an example. And I'll keep it super simple. We have better titles than this, but from a super simplistic, January, neck, right? That's our body region, cervical spine, neck. February, sports performance.
Mm-hmm.
That's lifestyle. March, low back, right? So now we get back. So we alternate monthly campaigns based upon a body region and a lifestyle. Now, then what we do is we chunk it down and we say, great, all month long, we are talking neck, cervical spine. Okay. Well, that doesn't mean much to people. That means something to us as healthcare providers, but what does that mean? So then we start to break it down to weekly topics that are different aspects or takes on that monthly campaign. Here's an example. Week 1 of cervical spine month might be, the weekly topic might be, is my arm pain coming from my neck? Now that's something that speaks to a patient, and that's a weekly topic that they might be interested in, right? So we take each monthly campaign, we break it down into weekly topics that are different little takes on that overarching theme or campaign. And then we craft daily posts and daily messaging that tie into the weekly topic. So this starts to become sort of a hierarchy. And I'll give you a for instance with that as well. We always post a couple times a day on social channels and a weekly email. We'll get into some of those tactics, but I want to break down a Monday through Friday strategy that I think everybody listening can get their wheels turning. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So we talk about it in terms of Motivational Monday, Testimonial Tuesday, Wake Up Wednesday, Thursday is Tactical Thursday, and Friday favorites. I'll take 60 seconds and explain what each of those are in a small nutshell. Motivational Monday is introducing, we'll use the is my arm pain coming from my neck example. That's your weekly topic. So Motivational Monday might be a short video of, hey, what's going on? This is Dr. Jeff over at the Smart Chiropractor. And all week long, we're going to be talking about, is your arm pain coming from your neck? Stay tuned, because we're going to be giving you a whole bunch of great information. The scripting on that's a little loose, but you get the point. I'm introducing.
No, great. Yeah.
Testimonial Tuesday is an opportunity to do a case study. You don't even have to have the patient there. You can just say, all week long, we're talking about, is your arm pain coming from your neck? It makes me think of Jack, who recently was in the practice, who had arm pain. He went to see all these doctors. They couldn't figure out what was going on. We discovered it came from his neck, et cetera, et cetera. You got to follow your local law. I know testimonials or those sort of case studies can vary depending upon who you are and where you practice, but there's great ways to highlight the benefits of your care.
Can I jump in there? So in Australia here, for instance, where we can't use a testimonial, but I could certainly jump online, and as long as something was kind of peer reviewed, and even if it was a case study, could I share that on my Testimonial Tuesday? Would that be a time where I could do?
For sure. For sure. With all of our weekly topics, we write out sort of a 400-word piece. And then that's always cited. And then every single social post we also put out is cited as well. So you could use any of those that we're doing automatically for our people, but you, as an example, but you could research it yourself. Absolutely. And say, okay, what are a few key takeaways from the latest literature? And let me highlight that. And here's the benefit of this, is that when you have a monthly campaign and a weekly topic, you're never in a daily post, you're never looking at a blank sheet of paper thinking, what do I want to talk about? All you have to do is say, well, it's Tuesday. So I want to have one fact. And this week we're talking about arm pain. Okay. Coming from the neck, cervical radiculopathy. I know that. And it's neck. Okay. So now you have a game plan and you can hit it and go for it, instead of thinking the overarching doom of what am I going to talk about today, which is what most docs and all healthcare providers struggle with.
And I think inside of that too, that you can be a little bit cheeky. One of the ways I often say it because I can't share a testimonial. So I'll often say, hey, listen, I can't tell you about the great results, unfortunately, that we get here at the practice, but let's talk about what some of the research says. So the mere fact of me having that sentence at the start there infers that we get great results there. It's walking a line that has me on the appropriate side of it, but at least I can kind of get a little bit of social proof with regards to that. Okay, so Motivational Monday, Testimonial Tuesday,
Wednesday is Wake Up Wednesday. So for this, this is where, the docs that we work with, they literally kind of read our script. So it is the research that matters is what we call it weekly, which is what's the research and why does it matter? It's named that way. So, and that's just about 300 to 400 words, just 1 or 2 minutes, really breaking down the research in a nutshell and in a compelling fashion. So then Thursday is Tactical Thursday. Tactical Thursday is about taking that, and I like to call that almost show and tell day. So this might be a tactical tip tying to it. Again, we're talking about what we're made up our week, right? Our weekly topic is arm pain. So you might say, hey, here's a couple stretches you can do at home. Here's a technique that I utilize. It is show and tell. So it's time to get tactical around how you think about that weekly topic. Could be a tip, could be a stretch, could be an exercise, could be a technique you utilize in your practice, anything that you want to get tactical on.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Love it. So great. And Friday?
Friday favorites. It's a great opportunity to do one of two things. highlight a product or service that you have in your practice that can benefit the patient, that's revenue producing for you. Great opportunity to tie something in. Could be, an inflammation reduction supplement or something like that, right? Cervical radiculopathy. Hey, if you're inflamed and we have this. Or you can highlight another business that does great work in that space. Hey, I know we've been talking all week about, is your arm pain coming from your neck? Well, once you're feeling better, I love you to meet, Dave here, who runs the local gym. He has such a great strength and conditioning program. We love to refer our patients after they get through their rehab to stay well over there. Now we start building I know your mind's already turned on. This is where you start to build reciprocity. They can share it. But Friday Favorites is about showing your favorite things. Could be a product or service that you have within your practice, another service provider that's in your practice, massage, whatever it might be. It could be a literal physical good. Yep. Or highlighting another business. What are your favorite things, people and or places or things that tie to that weekly topic?
And Jeff, a lot of these examples, excuse me, that we've given have been video. Do they need to be done by video, or could it be just a blog post? Could it be just an image? What are your thoughts with regards to that?
Yeah, as you know, and I've heard you discuss at length, that video is the most powerful way to make that connection and to really be able to transmit the message in the most effective way. And many of the platforms will favor the video content from a reach perspective. So video is going to be the best way, but if you are hamstrung, or you're just so fearful you can't get over the hump, getting out there with something is better than nothing. But if you're asking me what the best solution is, video is it.
Yeah. And by video, I'm talking just grab my iPhone selfie style. And could it even be like a little live video? Does it need to be high production value? What are your thoughts with regards to that?
I think you can run and gun these. I think you can absolutely just take out that phone, make sure you're in an area where the lighting's halfway decent, where, there's not too much noise. But I don't think you necessarily need to go crazy with them. Again, if there's a topic that you can pre-plan, that you really want to go above and beyond, hey, by all means, go for it. But as we've discussed, and we were talking pre-roll, one of the most important things is consistency. So if you're going to be committing to do something like this each and every day, or at least a couple times a week, if you just choose a couple of your favorite days, the most important thing is to get going, right? It's like results follow action. So it's taking action. Otherwise, we can all end up in a rabbit hole of, I just need this one more piece of gear. And next thing you know, 6 months have gone by.
And very much guilty of having fallen over this last 6 months of down the rabbit hole of more and better gear with regards to that stuff. One of my coaching clients, Chris, is just, great at creating videos. And he had this realization recently that he was getting fancier and fancier videos. He realized in the end, he says, what's way more important than my fancy videos is me just being consistent. So he's now got a little workflow just with his phone, where all on his phone, he's able to kind of wrap the video, add a border to it, get the subtitles on there. If some text is appropriate for what he's saying, he does all of that with apps on there. And he's, creating, at the moment, he's on a 30-day challenge where he's creating content every day, but he's easily putting out a 1 to 3 minute video, once or twice a week. And I think it's really interesting, and it's great news for us as health practitioners, is that there's been a great trend that shift from these really high production videos, DSLR cameras, sound effects, all that kind of stuff, right back to the organic feel of grab your phone. And like Jeff said, don't do it in a noisy environment. Make sure that we can actually see you. Make sure we can kind of hear you. If there is a background behind, just make sure it's not distracting and or boring. That's it. Just choose those things there too. And your mobile device is definitely great. There's something else I want our listeners and our audience to be aware of there too. And it's the importance of naming. What Jeff has done such a great job in terms of going through from there. Instead of saying, look, here's Monday's content, Tuesday's content, Wednesday. It's not, it's Motivational Monday, it's Testimonial Tuesday. When we name something, or when you name something in terms of practice there too, it becomes new, it becomes different. And there's a level of value that comes from it, which is why, I want you to start naming your things. If you've got your own special 3-part examination system, call it that. This is the Rose 3-part examination system that Dr. Rose is going to go through with you today. And this would be way more exciting for your patients. Hey, welcome. It's Motivational Monday. We're talking about there too. I love the way that you've done that, Jeff. Can you share a little bit more about the importance of how we name things and how you go into choosing names for stuff?
Yeah, there's two aspects of that, right? One is what are you trying to project externally? And then the other is what are you trying to keep track of internally? So we'll start with external, because when we're talking external, what I mean by that is, what's the name? And many times these are the same, but how are you thinking about what you're naming things from the patient point of view? So for instance, cervical radiculopathy week doesn't ring as well to a patient, a person in the community, regular people, as is my arm pain coming from my neck. So we always try to think about things, and an easy way to think about it is to say, well, what's the life effect or life impact, right? If you're thinking about your medical or your healthcare lingo, an easy way to try to break out of that is to say, well, how's that actually affect somebody? Or what does somebody tell me when they come in with this? Those are probably the words that you want to start thinking about in terms of naming a campaign, a title, a topic, etc. Now, in terms of the internal, I think what you also brought up is exceptionally important. When you turn on the television, you look through the grid of what's going on, and it says football or Seinfeld, or it's not just, well, whatever happens to be on at any given moment, and we could name it something different each and every week, right? Our bodies, our minds have been trained since the 1920s, maybe even before that with newspapers. I mean, probably 100, 150 years ago, for cadence, right? How frequently a newspaper comes out every morning, right? And what's the title of it? Okay, great. The sports section, the business section. And I read the New York Times, not the New York Post. It enables people to make decisions and to be able to count on something. And that's exceptionally important, because that's how you cultivate and build a tribe, is not through what one of my friends says is a random act of content, but by consistency and creating systems and processes. And one of the best ways to do that is by creating some naming conventions. And a friend of mine, Jason Deitch, says this, I say, name it what it is. Motivational Monday is Monday, and when you start to do what seems to be almost so simplistic, there's a lot of elegance and power in that. So those are my thoughts around naming.
The consistency thing is, obviously we know it's important. I was thumbing through my Instagram feed recently and had an ad posted up there from a guy that something about it really triggered me. I went, oh, this is really kind of cool. I'm going to go and find out a little bit about this fella. So I kind of clicked on his profile. I went back there too. And he'd had, maybe there was 6 times that he'd posted, and there was at least 2 or 3 months in between all of them. And what had captured my attention and really had me with a level of hunger and interest, all of a sudden I went back and went, oh, this guy's not all that committed at all. Like, he's not really there to show up for me. And it was, as somebody who studies marketing and is aware of it, I was so, to be able to see the visceral response that I lost. And this is what happens with, many of our patients see the same thing when they go to our website, and our last blog post was in June last year. They're looking through our feed, there's nothing in there. So when you were talking about consistency beforehand, this obviously had us posting at least every day. And did you say twice a day with regards to that content, Monday to Friday?
It's a good question. So the way that we go about it within the Smart Chiropractor is we auto post for all of our members at least once a day to their Facebook and Instagram. What I described to you is sort of what we call our active pathway, which is our docs that are really interested in going above and beyond and doing those extra personalized videos, those sort of custom things that I know you focus on and do such a great job with. That's really the Monday through Friday that I just described. But in terms of the foundational base layer that we automate for everybody, set it and forget it, they don't need to think about it, we post at least 1 time per day to their Facebook and Instagram channels. And then we post weekly to their YouTube page. And we send out a weekly email is one of the long-term drip series or campaign, which we can break down. And then we have a couple other email campaigns that are shorter and punchier in duration.
And then that long-term email that would go out, that would reflect also what the topic of the week was. Hey, this week we're talking about, is my arm pain coming from my neck? It's that same kind of story.
You named it. You got it. That's it. We tie our long-term drip sequence. It's called also Research That Matters, because it's research that matters, right? So you're able to touch on 52 different topics in a year. And then at the bottom of our emails, we basically have two calls to action. You get to choose. So try not to have 5 or 10, because then nobody's going to be able to make a decision.
Yes.
But we have 2, and one of them is to join our health tribe. Guess where that points to? But to your Facebook page. So you can stimulate engagement on your Facebook page through your email list, because these things should all be playing together. I'll talk about that in a second. The other is schedule an appointment. And that goes directly to your online scheduler. So it might be somebody didn't know that you took care of that issue. Maybe you reminded them. Maybe they forward it to a friend. But either way, they can connect with you on Facebook via our email. Our strategy is connect on Facebook, one button, or the other button is hop right over to that scheduler and get on your schedule. That could be your website. It could be your online scheduler. It could be a page of your EHR. Depends upon the practice and the provider.
And about how long is that email? What's your best recommendations?
Yeah, we do about 300. It's about 300 words and we always have a nice bold graphic. We really title it in a way, the subject line is key for the open, right? For docs, just get some tactical tips here. If your open rate stinks, like if your open rate's 5% or something like that, that's a subject line issue. That means you're not stimulating the interest for the person to read it. If your click-through rate, which means somebody's clicking in the email and taking an action, if your click-through rate stinks, that means your call to action is either off or it's just not positioned appropriately, right? So those are the 2 key things to look for in the email. But our email, to answer your question very clearly, our email is about 300 words, nice big bold header graphic at the top. We size things differently, so it's not just all one thing. And then we have 2 nice big buttons at the bottom, or those join our health tribe or schedule an appointment. Two big buttons at the bottom.
And in essence, that email that's going out, Jeff, is it basically saying, hey, look, this week we're talking about, is my arm pain coming from my neck? Most people are surprised to hear that chiropractic can help these things, X, Y, and Z. Bit of information, hey, join my tribe or make an appointment. Is that in essence what the email is doing, but a little bit more eloquently?
Yeah, we actually break it up into 3 little sections. So the first section is the bottom line, and that explains the bottom line. What's the bottom line about this, right? Then it's why does it matter? So we have a couple sentences on why it matters. We have 3 bullet points. Those are usually the stats or the takeaways. So if somebody skims the email, they see numbers and okay, what's that? And then the last section is next steps. And that's usually the transition to get into the call to action, where your next steps are to do X, Y, and or Z. So our emails, we break out into 3 short sections. 1 is the bottom line first, which is the bottom line. 2 is why it matters, which is highlighting why it matters. That has a couple bullet points in it. And then next steps is the 3rd piece right before those 2 buttons and calls to action.
And what do you think a reasonable open rate that, our listeners should, what should they expect? What's the range?
That's a great question. It can, and this can be tricky, because if you go on to MailChimp or a Constant Contact and you look at what's right for healthcare at large as an industry, that's hospital systems to anything else. So those numbers can sometimes actually be a little inflated. It also depends upon how often you've touched your list. There's some docs that come to us, they have a list of 3,000 people. We say, when's the last time you emailed them? And they say, what email? So, it depends on how have you nurtured your list? Have they learned to learn from you or not? So, that can be a highly variable equation. What I would say is that we really like it to be above 10% open. If you're not above 10% open, even on a dormant list that's, kind of crusty and you got to wipe the cobwebs off, you should be able to get 10% open. In an ideal world where you're optimizing, you're around 20 to 25%. And maybe a special promotion, you could even get up to 40% or more. And I'm talking about, and I'm going to get a little geeky here in the marketing lingo, but I'm talking about unsegmented lists. So your whole list. Now, if you segment or you take a little piece of your list and then you craft a specific message for just those, you could still very easily attain a 40% open rate or so if it's a specific message to a very small group of people at the right time. But when we're talking about our weekly reactivation emails, those emails week in and week out, they're going to keep on. 3 to 5 people come back into your practice, schedule off those emails week in and week out, and you can count on it. You should be, I'll call it in the middle and say, let's get you to 15% open rate or more would be nice. I love to see 20, 25% is really where we like to see it. But when we take into accord some of these, old dusty lists, it can drag things down a bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that I often don't do a great job in clarifying, because I think 15% should be a bare minimum. 25% is great there too. But you're right. If somebody hasn't emailed their list for a long time, it might take some time to get people, again, that consistency. They're going to see an email from you. But when you're showing up week after week after week, it starts to build a level of trust there as well. Let's talk platforms. You've mentioned about heading to Facebook and Instagram at this stage, the video kind of once a week up to YouTube. Do you have a love affair with either platform, so to speak? Do you have a preference? Should we be doing both? If someone's going to manage this themselves from home and not use your services, what are your recommendations?
I think it's about finding what you're passionate about and where you can stay consistent. And some of that takes a little bit of trying it out, right? That's the best way to learn always, is to sort of try things out. So for instance, I think there's a couple of different ways to look at it. If we just look at sheer volume of people, well, then Facebook takes the cake, right? If we're just looking for volume. But for many of us, we're not looking for volume. We're not global enterprises. We are taking care of the people in our communities. So there's going to be an abundance, more than enough people that you could ever serve in your community that are on Instagram or on Facebook. Yeah. So I think the question that I would ask the provider is, if you're going to choose one, ideally, I'd say both, because both really are those kind of prime social platforms as far as I'm concerned. However, if you're going to choose one or you're limited in time, then I would just look at them and make the decision on what you are more interested in. For example, every Instagram post is going to have a picture or a video, right? If you do a story, it could be a picture or a video, or if you do something in the feed, it could be a picture or a video. So you have to be willing and able to do that. Whereas if you're saying, gosh, I'm a curator, I like to see what's out there and share really cool stuff, well, then Facebook might be the place for you, because they help link stuff easier, where people can, see something on your feed, click on it, and it links out. Instagram doesn't allow that type of linking, and it's a little bit more visual. So my big suggestion would be, play around with them a little bit, get a feel for what gets you excited and resonates with you personally. Where are you spending more time personally? And that might be the platform for you.
Having some passion behind anything that we do is generally a good recipe for having us be consistent. If you're enjoying doing it, if it feels like a home environment for you, you'll continue. And it's easier than ever nowadays to cross post. All of my Instagram, when I'm up there, it says, do you want to send this to your Facebook page as well? And I just go, yes. My focus is absolutely my Instagram page. It's where I feel most comfortable. And I kind of secondary post over to Facebook. If I get a notification that there's some kind of engagement, then I will go there. But it's not a platform that I tend to, spend time on there. I think if people are feeling overwhelmed, cross post to the second one, choose the one that you love. Either of them are great. Do you, talking about platforms as well, do you have some thoughts about kind of LinkedIn as a platform?
That's one that is sneaky and accelerating quickly. So I think there is a lot of opportunity on LinkedIn, because my experience has been, you can kind of geek out a little bit more and people dig it. Like, you can get into the nitty gritty, right? So if you were wanting to talk about our cervical radiculopathy example, you could clearly always post something that is very, very, low level consumer friendly on LinkedIn and do well. But what I have seen also is it gives you get a little more latitude over there, right? There's a lot of professionals. So it gives you the opportunity to sink your teeth into things a little bit deeper that you might not on some of the other platforms, which I think is really, really interesting. The other nice thing about LinkedIn is, of course, in theory, you can really get to people who are influencers and decision makers in the 1 + 1 = 11 sort of territory, meaning, hey, you can reach out and connect pretty easily. Their search functionality is really nice. If you're trying to connect with somebody who owns a gym, who maybe is another healthcare provider, where instead of going 1 to 1 to 1 to every person, you're connecting with somebody who then has an audience of hundreds of thousands. Now, the same things, don't get me wrong, hold true on Facebook and also on Instagram for sure. The collaborative videos, DMing people on Instagram is huge, but I like LinkedIn as a right underneath Facebook and Instagram. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there, because it really the code hasn't been cracked. We all saw Facebook ads do exceptionally well and then struggle, and now people do well and struggle. Like, there's a lot of data there, right? There's a lot of data. There's a lot of historical stuff you can use to your benefit, or you can say, it's not right for me anymore. Where LinkedIn still has some of that blue ocean, right? That uncharted territory, which there's always opportunity there.
Yeah. And I think at the moment anyway, when you think about these platforms as they're real estate, and as the real estate has been purchased more, it gets harder and more expensive to buy it there as well. The real estate on LinkedIn at the moment is cheaper, which means you put a video up, they're going to organically have more reach. They're wanting to really encourage that too. I would think this, I'd encourage our audience to think about, who is your audience? So if it tends to be, one of my practices, for instance, is inner city, professional couples, that kind of stuff. It's a perfect LinkedIn audience. Our other practice, which is a little bit more rural, none of our patients are on LinkedIn there as well. It's a very blue collar type sort of area there. So that would be, when people are asking me these questions, I like to say, like, who are your patients? Where do they hang out? And if you're not sure, then, over the next week, get your front desk staff, or you ask them, hey, what platforms are you on? That's it. Like, it'll take you 1 week, get a pen and piece of paper. And if they're, spending most of the time, of the majority of the time on one platform, that's where you need to be so that you can kind of be in front of them. That's my thoughts on that kind of stuff there too. So we've talked about...
I think that's a brilliant strategy. And the one other thing I'll say is there's a lot of opportunity in LinkedIn groups. So we all know about Facebook groups, but there's LinkedIn groups that are very high performing in terms of engagement. And also LinkedIn is very favorable. It's almost like the early Facebook groups, where if you put a post in a LinkedIn group, a majority of the individuals in that group are going to see them. Most people don't scout it out, but I'll give you an example. I'm in 2 chiropractic focused groups, and one of them has over 20,000. The other one has over 8,000. Those are bigger than some of those are larger than some of the largest Facebook groups around chiropractic are on LinkedIn. So, again, this is something you'd have to search it out for your community. What are you after? Who are your patient types, as you're describing, is just so brilliant and so critical. But don't sleep on LinkedIn groups, because there is a big opportunity there.
Yeah, that was something I wasn't even aware of, Jeff. I'll have to have a bit of a look at that afterwards also. I think what I'm hoping for lots of our audience now is that they'll fit into many different categories, but what Jeff has laid out for you is a protocol, for lack of a format that can help you go, okay, how do I look at this for a different way? When you're trying to come up with content daily, weekly, monthly, it can seem overwhelming. But Jeff is just like, okay, for a month, I'm going to focus on, whether it be a body region, or then next. We talked about, again, one of the lifestyle ones was kind of sporting performance. Can you give me a couple of examples of some of the other lifestyle type sort of focuses that a practice might have?
Yeah, certainly. Pediatrics, you could have a pediatric month. Right?
Yes.
You could have a pregnancy month. You could have an ergonomics month. You could have a posture month. You could have a sports performance month. So there's a lot of territory that you could cover within the scope of those different lifestyle topics.
Yeah. So so often, in fact, I see that she is a friend of yours there too, which made me smile even more. The movement maestro. Yes. That she talked about when I was chatting with her on the podcast. What happens with time is you start to see everything as postable. You're starting to, that's the goggles that you're kind of looking through the world. It's like, there's a story there. That's something that my patients will love. Or I can kind of break that down. And your framework from there helps it even more with regards to, all right, step by step to help people move through. So if someone wants to kind of find out a little bit more about how they can work with you, they should be following you on the socials and stuff like that as well, because they can learn and piggyback. And, gang, the whole fact that Jeff has come on here and shared his platform, he's okay for you to rip it off. Don't take the same names. That would be being a jerk. But he's laid out a framework for you that might help many of you to go, okay, great. Let me have a theme. And even if you go, look, I'm going to have a theme on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And, maybe it's, do what works for you. But if you're like, man, I would really like somebody to help me out with this kind of stuff. Jeff, where do they find you?
Yeah, so anybody can head over specifically for what we discussed today. The Smart Chiropractor is really the depot of all that content. Now, one thing I will say, it depends on when this comes out, because we are in early October, we're going to relaunch the Smart Chiropractor website, and there's going to be an array of blogs that we've written, tools, resources, social optimization guides, a podcast, you name it. All of it's done, all of it's filmed, but we'll be launching that. But it's live right now, so you can head on over to thesmartchiropractor.com. Or if you'd like to reach out to me directly, my name is Jeff Langmaid, and this is a long email address, but it's jeff@theevidencebasedchiropractor.com or jeff@thesmartchiropractor.com. I'm happy to help anybody. The most important thing, I think, is for providers to share their unique message of health. So if we can have and help them, as you do on every episode, really break down, I feel the same way. If we can help you, fantastic, but take what you've learned today, meld it to what works exactly and specifically for you. The tools out there, there's never been a tool set that's been greater, and you never had a greater ability to connect with people. That doesn't mean it's simple and easy, but it certainly gives you the opportunity to do so. So, I would encourage everybody listening to keep on listening and keep on learning, because that's how you're going to continue to grow and develop. And don't get stressed out. Sometimes I'm going off on a tangent here, but sometimes people get stressed out because they can't do everything. Don't stress out about that. Find what you're passionate about, where you believe you can be consistent. That'll evolve over time. But we always say results follow actions, and it's all about taking one step at a time and learning as much as you can along the way.
Gang, Jeff is one of the good guys. There's often, in all fields across there, things can be really front loaded. There can be a lot of fluff and bubble at the front there too, that there's not a lot that substantiates the back of it there too. I feel grateful that I've known Jeff now for a couple of years and watched the work that he's done. He knows his stuff. So if you're looking for somebody to help you with this too, and I want to leave, and I want to tell you why I think this is really important as well. I was watching a little Netflix documentary the other night. I think it might be called Kiss the Ground. It was talking about and if you haven't watched it, I think that's the title. I'll have the actual proper title in the show notes there as well. It was talking in essence that with some of the global warming and some of the challenges that we're having nowadays, the health of our soil is incredibly important. That when we can start to kind of get carbon back into the soil there, when we can farm a little bit differently, the change that'll make to global warming, to food, all that kind of stuff there too. And it was so damn inspiring. And many of the lifestyle suggestions and tips they were giving were all the things that us as chiropractors, as natural health practitioners, talk to our patients about. Hey man, eat more foods from nature. If you can, go organically, okay? Exercise a little bit more, rest. Start to think about the environment of your body, think about the environment at large there too. And it just reminded me that the conversations that we're having with our patients are not only good for the patients, but they're damn good for our planet as well. Like it's so important that we be out there taking a leadership role with this, and we need to be as good as sharing our message out wide as we are with sharing it one-to-one. And if you feel overwhelmed by that, then just reach out to Jeff. He and his team will help you do all of that as well. If you've got some questions, then I'll help you do it. There's 160 free episodes here. Jeff is about to release a podcast that I'm sure will be chock full of stunning content there as well. So Jeff, thank you. And again, any final thoughts from you with regards to, I didn't mean to take that. I'm so passionate about this at the moment though.
Well, I'll piggyback on what you said, because I think it really is, it's important. A lot of us I'll go a little whimsical here, but a lot of us can get dragged down with the day-to-day of what we're doing, or things start to become monotonous to a certain degree, or, the stresses of life. That's the way things go. But I think many of us as healthcare providers, we forget what it's like to not know. Mm. And that's a very important aspect of it. So the simple things that you and I and all the listeners know and almost take for granted at a certain point, because of how much we know about the human body, how much we know, as you described, of food and nutrition and exercise and movement and thought and stress, it really, you don't know that 99% of the population is unaware. So getting out there and spreading your message of unique health is just so critically important. And again, the tools have never been more available. You don't have to have $10,000 to run a one-page ad in the yellow pages, and that's your one shot to say any messaging you want the whole year. You literally can evolve your message. You can take people on a journey. As they say in story branding, you can become their guide to better health, to better living. And that's such an important responsibility that I think all of us need to try to step back from and say, let me really understand the totality of what I can offer here. Because all of us are somewhat technicians with our specific skill set of what we do. And we can become so myopic with that. But if you take a step back and realize that the impact you can make on your community And many people, as we've seen also, the social platforms allow you to make a reach far beyond that. We're talking from halfway around the world right now to each other and have become friends, and being able to impact different people, different places, and different things throughout time is something that none of us should take for granted. And while the tools are here, I'm just going to encourage everybody, take a single action step today or tomorrow to get out there, to stretch your comfort zone a little bit, because it might be something that you never learned about, but that changes the life of somebody else forever. And I think that's the most critically important thing we can do as healthcare providers.
Beautifully said, Jeff. Thanks for being a part of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, buddy. I look forward to round 3, hopefully sometime soon. See you soon, mate.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out the Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work one-on-one with you to apply, implement, systematize, and help guide you and your practice to the next level. Now you can join me on over at addiomedia.com/join. That's addiomedia.com/join. I'd love to see you in there.